Have you ever said to yourself, I want to die? Have you ever heard anybody else say something like that? I'm Dr. Carol. Thanks for joining me on this episode. The desire to not live anymore comes from a deep place of hurt, and it's not nearly as uncommon as it may at first sound. The number of particularly young people who are thinking about attempting or even successfully dying by suicide continues to increase. The last 2 or 3 years in the COVID-19 pandemic have in some ways made that even worse. My guest on the program today, Heather Palacios, knows what it's like to be there. She says that she has been fighting suicide for 40 years. She is still here. She first started planning suicide when she was 8 years old. But she's still here, and she is helping many other people stay here too. Heather is a founder of the organization Wondherful. You'll hear a bit about that, dedicated to encouraging people with mental affliction in a number of areas. She and her husband, Raul Palacios, together serve at Church by the Glades in Florida. Her story is pretty remarkable. I'm not going to wait any longer. I want you to hear it directly from her. Here's Heather Palacios. Heather Palacios, welcome. So glad that you're here. I've been looking forward to this.
Thank you, Dr. Carol. I love it when a doctor wants to talk to me. It feels so legit.
Well, I pray so. You know, we're going to talk about some things today that some people find hard to talk about, but talking about them is part of the way that we deal with them. I have heard some of your story, and it's pretty remarkable. You are giving hope now to so many people that need it. For those of our audience that may be hearing you for the first time, let's just start with your story.
Okay, well, it is a little unorthodox, but it essentially starts when I was 8 years old. At 8 years old, I went up to my bedroom on 254 South College Drive, Bowling Green, Ohio, and penned a letter to my grandma on my butterfly stationery. And today we would say that that was a suicide letter. That was the essence of the letter. And I mailed it to her, and she had enough wherewithal to know that she needed to let my mom and dad know. And, you know, back then in 1981, there was not movements and therapy gatherings and agendas for that kind of a problem. So my mom and dad did the best they could. They called the local church, and a deacon came over and he prayed with me, and we moved on from that incident. And then again, it would flare up when I was about 14. We moved, and moving as a teenager derailed me, but not the way that it usually derails teenagers. It put me on a fast track to want to take my life again. And I wrote a suicide letter, and I put it on the counter and went to put my plan in motion when there was a knock at the door, and it was the orkin bug man. He needed to come in and spray for bugs. So I can't make this stuff up.
Not just the bugs.
Yeah. Yes. Can't make this stuff up. Interesting factoid, though, is during the pandemic, when we were all looking for things to do, I was cleaning out my garage, and I found that 14-year-old suicide letter. I keep it, but I do not read it. I just don't want to go back there. So, but I do have it. And then fast forward from that incident to when I was in college. I was dating a guy. It was a highly dysfunctional relationship. And, you know, there's a lot of drama with girls in college and guys, and we could respond adversely in all kinds of ways. But again, for me, it was just a fast track for suicide. I ended up taking a bottle of pills to try to take my life, and was rushed to the hospital where they were able to save me. And then I would say that the biggest turning point with a lifelong battle with suicide was when I had been married for 1 year to my husband, who's a pastor, which makes me a pastor's wife.
Yes.
And interesting how that works, because I never saw that coming. But about a year after we had been married, I couldn't reconcile battling, wanting to die, having it be such a insatiable desire inside of my mind and being a pastor's wife. They just don't go together, and divorce wasn't an option. So I made a pretty calculated decision that day that I was going to take my life, and proceeded to do so in a public parking lot, and didn't leave my husband a note, didn't want him to think it was his fault. So while I was taking my life, I had him on my cell phone, was apologizing. He was able to identify my location and call first responders, but all of them were unable to stop me. I had become unusually strong and belligerent. I liken it to like Mark chapter 4 with the demoniac, just a very powerfully strong resistance to authority and anyone stopping me.
Yeah.
So they were forced to tranquilize me. They knocked me out, and they sedated me so they could take me to the hospital where they treated my injuries. And then, you know, the hospital did a little bait and switch on me, and I never saw this coming, but instead of discharging me and letting me go home, they stepped in with the state of Florida law that said, you know, when you're a threat to yourself or society, the law says we have a right to detain you for 72 hours for observation. And, you know, there's a lot of controversy surrounding that law here in Florida. I know other states have it as well. I don't want to take on that argument. However, I will say I'm an advocate for it because it saved my life. I needed to be locked up. Yeah, I wanted to die, and I probably would have tried again had they just charged me that day. So it was, you know, that night on July 30th, 2000, where I was locked in isolation in a psychiatric ward that was very deplorable. This was 22 years ago. We've come a long way with dignifying mental health treatment centers, but this one was pretty bad. And just was so mad at God. I had just spent my life trying to die and was failing at it. And now I'm a pastor's wife that failed at it. Yes. And how do you come back from that? And what was frustrating is in my mind, you need to die, but I couldn't because I was in a psych ward. Yeah. And I kind of just had a conversation with God and just yielded to him throughout the night, ended up going from being so mad to yielding, and just said, look, if you could just get me out of here, I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to help people not end up here. And, you know, when I got out, it was a lot of hard work to put me back together again. I liken it to the scarecrow. I had become just a pile of straw, and my psychologist and psychiatrist and pastor and husband, we had to work really hard to put one piece back at a time. Yeah. But we did. And I worked really hard, Dr. Carol, for 52 weeks. And then after that, I honored my commitment to God. I've been helping people ever since then. And I still battle it. I still battle suicide. I do everything I can. I work hard. Just like anybody that has a weakness, you have to work hard to defeat it, because the enemy is real and he's strong. But I do believe that with God, all things are possible, even defeating suicide when you get tempted by it.
You say on your website, you've been fighting a suicide battle for 40 years, but you're still here.
Right.
You shared some of the highlights, and wow. Got to just ask you, Heather, a couple things through that. One is, you say you were mad at God. Can certainly understand. I shouldn't even live, and I can't even kill myself, right? And being mad at God about that and everything. What do you say to the people who would say, well, you just must have sin in your life, or you got to pray right, and all this stuff would go away? I don't believe that, but some people might still wrestle with that. What do you say about that?
Right. No, and I've had to entertain that question right to my face from critics.
Sure.
And I'm not offended. I don't take offense to that. God just has not put that in my heart to be offended when people question the integrity of my story, or that it's a lack of faith on my part.
Right.
Because in my heart, I think I'm one of the most faithful, strongest people I know, because I have fought death for a long time and I'm still here.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you think God looks at you with this struggle? You've obviously wrestled with God about this, probably in various ways, for a number of years. You're a pastor's wife. You're talking about God, being a representative for him. How do you think he sees your struggle?
Great question. mean, I could be wrong, but I think that he would see it the way that he saw Paul with Paul's struggle. Okay. Paul had a thorn in his side. Mm-hmm. He didn't want it. He begged God to get rid of it. And God did not. God did not remove that thorn. And so Paul had a choice. He could just give up, get mad, or just be a good steward and do the best he could with what he had. And I try to liken my life in that fashion. I do believe that God could restore my brain. I really think that I could have a brain that's really normal like yours, Dr. Carol.
Well, I don't know about my brain being normal. I haven't told you about my stuff yet.
But I do know that until that day happens, I'm just going to be a good steward with it and live and fight hard some days more than others to live and help others do the same. Just like Paul.
Yeah. Yeah. An aspect that you sort of alluded to when you mentioned the story of Jesus with the demoniac. Mm-hmm. It's in Mark and another mm-hmm. gospel or two. What role do you see spiritual warfare, the kingdom of darkness, playing in the kind of battle you've experienced? I'm not assuming anything by that, just something mm-hmm. I know some people may wonder about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I've had to investigate that. And I believe that I am a follower of Jesus Christ, that he lives in my heart. And so I cannot be possessed by demons.
Yeah.
But I live in a fallen, broken world where the enemy does have free reign and I can be tempted by the devil. And I think that the suicide temptation comes from his desire to seek, kill, and destroy mm-hmm. me. And that's in the scripture. So that's not just hyperbole. That's not just right. me speculating. Right. I try to back up everything I'm standing on with what the Bible says, period.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That fits. It really does. Moving a little beyond you for a minute, I have become aware over the last 2-3 years of what some are even calling a culture of suicide in our world, in our country. I remember talking with another physician whose mm-hmm. son is an emergency room physician. And he told me that his son had a real struggle finding pediatric psychiatry beds for the underage patients who came to the ER attempting suicide. You right. May have been, a child who wanted to die some years ago, but that is becoming even a bigger, at least more known issue now.
Right.
Do you have any opinion about what's going on with the suicide, if we even want to say suicide culture, that right. seems to be so big?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, no doubt social media plays a huge part. And the reason I say that is because I've done the funerals. I mean, I have presided over the funerals of suicides of students. I've been to the funerals of suicides of children. Wow. And the consensus in that loss for some of them was social media.
Wow.
And it's such a behemoth. I look at social media and I think of all the people I know that are no longer with us because of it. And it feels like the enemy is winning.
Yeah.
But I've got to do, I just have to do something. I mean, if I have to do something and I cannot take on the entire world and how they feel like they need to give up because of something they saw or something that was said on social media. But God can do anything.
Yeah.
And he has tapped me on the shoulder to run into these proverbial fiery buildings of people wanting to die because of cyberbullying and social media, and at least share your story with them, Heather, and the hope of God.
Yes. Maybe you can't change the whole world, but perhaps you can change the world for somebody, for many somebodies. I believe you are. a minute about your organization, Wondherful, and
Mm-hmm.
the life boxes.
Mm-hmm.
What are you trying to do?
So that happened out of, they say that like in, necessity is the mother of invention. What happened during the shutdown in 2020 is, I wasn't able to go physically to the psychiatric wards to visit people, or the hospitals where people had overdosed or attempted suicide. We weren't allowed to because of the
Yeah.
shutdown. And I've been doing these kinds of visits for decades. And when I go and make those visits, I always bring a box of the things that I've needed to still be here.
Mm.
Well, I was frustrated, and I had my friend Julie say, well, what if you can't go to them, could you at least ship that box to them? And so out of my dining room 24 months ago, we started shipping what I would normally deliver in person. And that became known as the LIFEBOX. And in 2 years, we've done 7,359 life boxes to 48 states and 14 countries.
Wow. Wow.
In just 2 years.
What kinds of people, how do you find out about these people? And who are they that you send these to?
Oh, so, I mean, suicide can happen for any reason. Depends on who you are.
Yeah.
You can commit suicide. I mean, you can commit suicide because you live alone and your pet died, and you cannot handle the anguish of that solitude without that pet. You could attempt suicide because you lost somebody to suicide and you feel like you could have done something. Grief, job loss, depression, pandemic, bullying, all these things can cause somebody to kill themselves. So I am not ever going to define who gets a life box and who doesn't. We have been putting it out there on my social media for 2 years, and we do not turn down anybody for any reason. We've done as young as a 5-year-old that attempted suicide to an 82-year-old who was a recent widow, and she wanted to die and go be with her husband. She didn't want to live anymore. We went to Uvalde, Texas, right after the school shooting.
Yes.
Because a lot of times grief will lead to suicide. And the school board partnered with Wondherful to set up a drive-through at the convention center in downtown Uvalde. And we ended up giving away, I think, like 400 grief life boxes.
Wow.
Many in Spanish because of the demographic there.
Right.
This week we had 2 police departments request the first responder life boxes. There's sadly a high rate in first responders. And we had 2 schools request life boxes for their student body because of a recent suicide.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Any stories, whether it's with the life boxes or over the last years that you have been speaking to people who have wanted to not live, any vignettes, any stories about someone who is now alive because you shared your story?
I mean, I do. I always think of this one. This happened during the pandemic. I had a acquaintance who is a Jewish lesbian crystal meth addict in recovery, and during the pandemic was really struggling with wanting to give up. Reached out to me. We sent her a life box, and she received it. She not only chose to keep living, but now she has her boots on the ground in her community. And when she encounters an addict or a homeless person, reaches out to us and requests a life box for them.
Wow.
And, now I've befriended her, and you couldn't get any more opposite. I mean, she's Jewish, I'm Christian. She's a homosexual, I'm a heterosexual. She's, crystal meth addict. You could say I have been battling suicide addiction. And so we're so opposite, But what we have in common is that we've wanted to give up and we didn't.
Yes. Yes. Beautiful.
And that, yeah.
What do you do to not give up? What are some things in your lifestyle? You've been battling this for decades successfully. What does that look like for you?
Well, I have to be responsible. I mean, if I had any other debilitating disease or infection, I would be responsible with that as well. If I had cancer, I would be responsible with the cancer to get better from the cancer. And I just see this as a malady in my brain, and my brain is an organ just like any other organ in the human body. And so I take it seriously, and I try to be responsible by regular counseling. I do take a medication. I journal. I read my Bible. I have boundaries. I exercise. I know my worth, and I go to church.
Yeah.
And if I stick to that script, I stay alive. It does not take away the temptation. I still battle that sometimes fiercely, despite all that hard work. But if I follow that script, I have been able to find myself, just like the Bible says, he will never tempt us. We will never be tempted beyond what we can handle, and he will show us a way out.
Yeah.
And I take God at his word with that.
I appreciate your testimony, Heather, that you have not turned your back on God or on the journey just because you still feel bad, maybe feel real bad, and maybe pretty often, whatever that frequency is. Your testimony is, I'm still here. I'm still doing it. I'm not quitting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've had to, sometimes I get pretty creative in fighting that temptation. I don't think like everybody thinks. So if I'm down and out, a lot of people just want to just hang out at home and binge a Netflix series, but my home becomes a den of temptation. I think about the pills in the bathroom, the knife in the kitchen, the car in the garage, and I process all that. And that what is a safe place for most, for me, can become a den of temptation. And so I just have to constantly be following my steps, make sure I'm doing all of that. And then, the golden rule for me is if I start to have those thoughts, I have to contact somebody immediately. So I have 3 people. I take my cues from Jesus. In his darkest mental hour, he had 3 people in the garden. And so I have my 3, and I will reach out to one of them. And
I'm glad you said that. Yeah. This isn't you fighting alone. God created us to need each other. Sometimes the people that I talk to will say, well, I don't have any friends, or the friends I have look down on me, or there's nobody at church who understands. I can't talk to anybody. Talk about the good, bad, and ugly of people, and why you keep trying to connect anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I believe that that's an enemy's lie. When the enemy says to somebody, you have nobody, I disagree with that emphatically. Because it's not true. First of all, you have God, and God is omnipresent. So he is right there with you at the same time that he's right here with me. So you're not alone. The Bible says, I am never alone. My Father is with me. Secondly, that there is a crisis suicide hotline that is 24 hours a day with trained, compassionate people that will draw near to you if you text or call them. And again, so now you've got 2 people. And then, so you reach out to me, and I'm going to send you a LIFEBOX and pray for you. Well, now you've got 3 people. So I don't subscribe to that, and I don't let people believe it if they pitch that to me.
That's good. That's really good. Jesus was very tight with his heavenly Father, as one young man said to me, and that's why he made it. But even for Jesus, there's a sense in which that wasn't enough. And I don't mean God is never not enough. He was the one who met you in that psych ward when you had nothing else to think about or do. But he really did create us for people. Jesus needed those three, as you mentioned. And
right.
we do
right.
too. Yes.
Right. And, you know, and I've been doing this for, I mean, I've heard it all. I've heard it all.
Sure.
But, you know, and so maybe there is that one person who has absolutely nobody. And, you know, I will encourage them to draw near to God and to reach out to, you know, there's a lot of telemed options for counseling, and I will always give those to them, and I will be their email friend. But I also think James chapter 4 says you don't have because you don't ask.
Right.
And I think if we truly have nobody, well, we need to start asking God, because God's going to answer that. He does not want us, to your point, to be alone. He wasn't even in the Trinity alone. I mean, he had a squad of three from the very beginning of time.
Yes.
So I believe if we ask him that and we mean that, he's going to provide.
That's good. That's really good. What can the rest of us do about this culture of suicide, about the darkness? Like you said, don't curse the darkness, light a candle. What kind of candle can the rest of us light?
That's a great question. I just did a teaching at a church on how to love people like me. And I based the whole message on how Abigail navigated Nabal and how my husband has navigated me. And just, I mean, for sake of time, the number one thing I would say, Dr. Carol, is it's my husband's job to love me, and it's God's job to save me. My husband has operated in that boundary, and we're still married, and I'm still alive. So
both of those are miracles. Yes.
Yeah. So I would say to anybody, one of the candles you need to light is for yourself.
Good.
Take the guilt and the burden off of you that you have to save people like me. You can't. Free yourself from that, but love us. And love can be from a distance through praying, and love can be up close through letting us cry. I mean, love's going to be defined different for everybody, but
sure.
we love us and let God save us. And then the other thing I would say for anybody that needs to light a candle for a child is believe them.
Okay.
Believe them. Don't dismiss it. Don't say they're being melodramatic. Don't say they're being a typical teenager. Don't tell them to get over it. I was 8 years old and I wanted to die. And that's corroborated by a letter I wrote and my 8-year-old journal that I still have. And I know I've done the life boxes for kids that tried to express it, and they weren't believed, and they did act on it, and they did die. So take it seriously.
Yeah. Is asking about it, is being curious, is following up, is talking about it going to make somebody take their life?
No, you know, that's such an unfortunate falsehood that's out there, that if I ask, it'll make them want to do it more. And I can say from a professional standpoint, statistically, that is categorically false.
Right.
All of you guys have done all the work, and you know the percentage, it is minuscule, that by asking it exasperates it makes it worse. But also from my husband, I've asked him, you know, my husband has asked me, and as the person that wanted to die, and I have somebody saying, hey, do I need to come home? Are you thinking about killing yourself? That's never made me want to do it more. That shows me somebody loves me and still wants me here. That is actually a very rescuing question to ask somebody.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Heather, maybe finally here, invite people to find out more about you, the Wondherful, the LIFEBOXes. Where can they connect, find out more?
It's Wondherful, and it's the word wonderful with an H before the E. So it's Wondherful, but that's LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. It's all the same word. and you can go to wondherful.com. You can request a LIFEBOX for someone, or you can request one for yourself. They are always free, and they are shipped 2-day priority. I don't mess around with it.
That's beautiful. Heather, it is a gift. You are a gift. Your story is a gift. We live in a world that's a mess. And to have you there as a light saying, if I can make it, you can make it too. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for believing in me to the point where you would trust me in front of your audience. I really appreciate it.
Well, I look forward to staying in touch, Heather, and many, many blessings on you, your family, and your work.
Thank you.
Wow. Whether you resonate personally with that story or whether you know somebody who may be struggling, maybe you are in a church position or a caring professional who meets people who may be struggling in various ways. Heather's story, I know, has challenged you, but it also gives hope. Do check out the links under this video, wondherful.com, and the links there on social media as well. Just some really great encouragement. And if you or somebody you know needs a LIFEBOX, like Heather said, it's free. Do request that. I want you also to know that you matter to me. You know, I think often about the people who may be listening or watching what I have to say in a moment such as this. And you matter. Know that Jesus sees you personally. And maybe right now this is coming to you over technology, but you matter. I would love to hear from you. You can certainly leave a comment under this video. I would love that. You can also come over to our website, drcarolministries.com. We have a lot of resources there to help encourage you about growing in your walk with God, about dealing with mental challenges, depression, anxiety, as well as a lot of other encouraging things. And there's a contact page there. If you want me to respond to you personally, you can leave me a message there on that contact page. It's confidential, and I will respond personally. Do know that you are seen. Jesus sees you. There's no place you can hide from him in the best possible way. You matter. Thank you for being with me on this program. And until next time, may God bless you.